let's go ahead and start a discussion.
I think that one, definitely is the Alpha and the Omega.
I thought for this morning we would pick up. Do that. All right. I thought for this morning we would pick up with kind of where we were ending last week. So at the end of class last week, Bob raised a really good question, which we were not able to adequately talk about, and I thought it's so good. I want to explore it further. If you weren't here, part of what happened is we were referencing some of John chapter 6 and the things Jesus says, and the disciples say, well, these are hard teachings. And Bob said, basically he's asking, well, is it hard or is it easy? I mean, Jesus says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And yet here's a case where the disciple is saying, well, this is really hard. And that's a great question. Is it really easy or is it hard? How do we understand it? So, first, I want to ask, let's give some examples, if you would. What are some examples that seem to suggest that the way of Jesus is not at all easy?
You're fighting culture and
Yeah.
human values.
Okay. Right.
Narrow path.
Okay. Yeah, I was really thinking of where Jesus indicates in the Gospels, right? Okay. But, I mean, you're exactly right, Ken. There's a struggle there. So, yeah, Jesus calls it a narrow path. There's a few that find it, which seems to sound like, well, this is going to be difficult, right? What else suggests that this path of Jesus is not easy?
You're turning the other cheek or carrying the cloak. The whole sermon on the mount at the beginning too.
Yeah,
Like everything Jesus said.
yeah. So everything in the Sermon on the Mount. Yeah, turning the other cheek. Somebody compels you to carry their bag 1 mile, carry 2, or if someone demands your coat, give him your cloak as well. I mean, those are hard sayings. And part of the question is, well, what exactly does he mean? Because it sounds very difficult. Those are good examples. Any other examples of what?
Reject your family.
Okay, yeah, the whole, unless you hate father, mother, brother, and sister, you cannot be my disciple. Sounds easy, doesn't it? Right? Right?
It is when your parents are.
It's hard for the cross.
Do what?
The cross.
Okay, yeah, and we're asked to take up the cross, bear the cross. Well, that doesn't sound easy, right? Doesn't sound easy.
It's hard to have wealth and enter the kingdom of God.
Okay, so the whole, I'll go with Ken first, the whole, how hard it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Which, on that occasion, the disciples go, well, who can be saved? Because they realize this is really hard. What?
Yeah, and forgive 70 times 7.
Okay, 70 times 7, right? Oh, that sounds easy. Endless forgiveness for the person who's doing the same thing over and over.
Remove this cup.
Okay, yeah, the whole Garden of Gethsemane episode, remove this cup from me, where even Jesus doesn't want to go along that path.
The world will reject you.
Okay, yeah. In the Last Supper episode in the Gospel of John, Jesus is very explicit. They've hated me, they're going to hate you. There's a day when they're going to think that by killing you, they're doing God some service. They're going to kick you out of their synagogue. Okay, so there's a whole lot, right? We could keep multiplying the instances of this is difficult. What he's saying, what he's talking about is difficult. Okay. So it seems like the real hard part is, so how do we understand when he says, my yoke is easy. Because we got plenty of evidence that this is difficult. So I think we've got to take a look at Matthew chapter 11 and see if we can't sort out what Jesus is saying when he talks about my yoke being easy. So I want us to look at Matthew 11. We'll start in verse 28. This is the statement that Bob referenced. Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Okay. So we've come up with plenty of examples that seem to dispute this statement. How do we start to sort this out? Any thoughts?
Well, there is I said all the Beatitudes, and then I thought, well, the second half of each of them is, this is the first or the second, but there's the blessing and the difficulty mixed
Right.
together in each of them, right?
Yeah. There's a kind of a tension there.
There's
Yeah.
tension. And then I said all of the Sermon on the Mount, and I thought, well, do not worry. And there are passages that are inherently easy. It's like I don't know how to resolve the tension you're having. Stuff.
Yeah. We see words of comfort and rest woven into the difficulties.
Yeah.
And even when Jesus says, "Do not worry," well, if I take that as the instruction, that's very hard. But what he's talking about would be a place I'd like to land, right? So, there's a sense of, he's talking about a place where I don't have to be consumed with worry. But if I hear it as, I'm giving you an instruction, don't worry, then I'm caught up in the thing where I don't know if I can do that, right?
So I hear in that passage is reassurance.
Right.
That you don't have to worry. You look at the lilies, and this is not as hard as it looks.
Yeah, if I'm not reading it as a duty to be fulfilled, but a place where I can land, where I can actually be, yeah, it's very encouraging. It's like, I don't have to be worrying about all this. Somehow, God is caring for me in the midst of all of it.
Greg, I find that it's hard when I refuse to obey. When I don't do it, it's hard. But as soon as I give in and say, "It's yours, God, I can't do this anymore," it becomes so much easier.
Okay, I like that. I think we're starting to move in a direction, because I think there is a reality. It is both hard and easy, and whether it's hard or easy might have something to do with us. You had a thought you want to share, Al?
Given the times, it's an agrarian society, so they certainly understood yoke and master, and it's his yoke. So if he's up on the cart and you're one of the oxen on the yoke, if you're on a straight path, the yoke isn't hard. You're not going left or right. You're in the middle of the yoke. You're just pulling the weight behind you. And if he's, what is the word he goes, I'm gentle and humble in heart. So if you have a gentle driver of the cart, well, you're probably, he's not whipping you to go faster. He's not whipping you to turn left. So I just look at it as, Jesus' yoke it's easy because he's been there and done the same thing.
Yeah.
I think it's also kind of where Carolyn, I have a friend who's Caroline. And I think it comes down to our ability to really understand
depth of God's plans for us. And we try to figure out things and make our own way and fix things.
Right. That may be more difficult than
Yeah.
it needs to be. But I'm trying to do it on my own. It may be more difficult.
Like if we took the position of the lilies of the field.
Yeah. John David?
So, one of the things about these people in Pakistan that I'm looking at that's so on the nose for the gospel is the idea of making bricks, being enslaved. It's very much the Jewish history. And as we know from the Jewish history, when they were in the desert, they were sort of longing to be back in that enslaved moment. I think that our God has a long history and tradition of trying to teach people rest and what it means to live into that rest. And in some ways, it is a dying to your own selfish ambitions and your own desires, seeking the manna on a day when you're really just supposed to be resting. These are people who always work 7 days a week, 365 days a year, constantly striving in their own ambitions. And the ease may come when you start to die to your own ways of doing things in your own selfish.
Yeah. 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 Well put. Look at the text we just read, because this is the text where he claims it. Who's he talking to? Verse 28. Who's he talking to?
Everyone that's weary and heavy laden.
Everyone who's weary and heavy laden.
Are we all?
Maybe some of us realize we are. See, his promise of an easy yoke of his way, he's saying to people who are already at the realization, this is too hard. Right? He doesn't say this, come to me, all you who are at ease right now and think life is pretty grand. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. He doesn't say that to them. He says it, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden. If you've already come to the conclusion, this is too difficult, I have something else for you. So, if we think back to some of those examples where we talked about what is hard, and we've already said it. So, and other things that you all have been talking about. So when Jesus says how hard it is for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven, why is that?
Pride.
Look,
Yeah, pride. What?
and anything that's going to serve as a source for my own independence. So, because how I think about it is, what's hard is when we try to act like God. When we're human and we accept God for who we are, that's the easiest. I know we're talking a different register, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
what's hard is when we attempt to be God. And so all those things that we were talking about earlier, the cross and the cup and the wealth and the,
Right.
source of our own security, right?
Yeah. When Jesus says it's hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, it's not a statement about net worth. It's not some sort of figure out what the line is. Those above it have an easy time. Those above it, whatever net worth is, have a hard time. It's more about a mentality, which is often played out in a person's circumstances. But I think what Jesus is saying in a time where there really wasn't a middle class, there's the poor, ordinary people, and then there's some people who are really well off. And for the people really well off in his day, life is pretty good for them. When he's talking about, let's turn everything upside down for the kingdom of heaven, how likely are they to want that? I mean, the system works for them, right? They don't want to see the world turned upside down for the kingdom of heaven. They're rich people in Palestine. They've got power, they've got means, right? So I kind of suspect that what Jesus is saying is hard for those who are doing very well, thank you very much. What do you mean I have to do that? What do you mean I have to give this up? But for those who are struggling already, then he's got good news. Right? So I think, yes, his burden is easy, his yoke is easy, his burden is light. But kind of like we're saying, it depends on where I am. If I'm trying to be God and trying to make everything work according to the way I want it to work, I am going to really struggle. Everything Jesus is saying is going to be very hard, because it's going to be, well, die to yourself, Greg. I don't want to die to myself. I mean, that's the last thing I want to do. Right? That's very hard. But if I'm already kind of like, life is beating me down, blessed are the poor in spirit. I'm already poor in spirit. Don't have to get there, Lord. I'm already there. I'm already discouraged and depressed about lots of things. Well, blessed are you. Right? So that's what I think is, it's my disposition that either I hear him as good news and, oh, this is a way to get out of what is hard and difficult, or it's bad news because I don't know if I want to give up things that I already have, right? Whatever that is. It could be pride, it could be possessions, it could be, whatever. Yeah.
There are two books that come to mind that both address this. One is by Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled. Of course, his classic statement in there, life is difficult, and until you face that, that's the first thing you need to face in life. And then Eugene Peterson's book, Along Obedience, in the same direction. He starts right out by saying, if you think that you're saved and everything's going to be easy, but we are wired to go the way of God. So it's going to be even more difficult if you don't learn to walk in the ways of Christ. And it doesn't, if you look at the life of Christ himself, nobody lived a more difficult. The one who's saying this went through. But in the end,
Yeah.
those are just thoughts that popped in.
Yeah, no, those are good thoughts. Yeah, Jesus is not saying life will treat you, life will be easy. He's saying, as kind of Alan's illustration, when he's the master, he's easy, he's gentle, he's nurturing, he's encouraging, he's helping you find peace. But yes, life is difficult. Life in itself is difficult. We struggle, we have challenges, we have losses, and anyone who's not being honest with you about those things is setting you up for a real shock, because that's the nature of life, is there will be disappointments. There?
Alan's image, I don't know why, but I thought that Jesus was yoked, he was one of the oxen, and you were bound to him. And I kind of like Alan's interpretation, but I also I think there's something maybe to the idea, do you think it might also mean my yoke in the sense, the one I'm taking up with alongside you?
Yeah, that was Marcia's point last week. We were having fun and we got right to the end and we were kind of overtime. But that was her point, is it's easy when Jesus is in it with you. And he's with us always. So, and these are metaphors, so they're flexible. They don't have one interpretation. Yes, you can think about it if he's the one who's yoked you like the oxen, but he's a good master, he's a good farmer, he doesn't abuse his cattle. But the other thing, another way to think about it is it's his yoke, and of course yoke has place often for two. And he's already bearing it. Come join me in my yoke, right? It's my yoke. I'm already bearing it with you, which is kind of like what I was trying to say this morning about thinking mystically about our baptism. When he was baptized, we were baptized. His yoke is our yoke. He's already taken it up, and now we're invited to join him in it. But he's there with us. We're never having to pull this on our own. Now, there's another way in which yoke was used, as I understand, is, well, hang on. Jim, you had a thought?
Okay.
Jump in.
My mother used to tell me stories about her grandfather who milked cows. Every day he'd take the milk to town, and he had a yoke. So when I see yoke, I see it as a tool for a human, not a tool for an animal. Also, it's a tool, not a punishment. And it balances your loads, and you're able to do whatever you need to do a lot easier with the right tools that Jesus provides for us.
Those are other good. See, that's what's really good about reading these things figuratively and metaphorically, because Jesus is referring to something, but he's wanting us to think about it. I love those images as well. I understand this to be the case. I'm not an expert in Near Eastern ancient culture and history, but from those who are, is that rabbis would talk about their yoke. It would kind of be like if you want to take a college class and you wanted first, before you signed up, to see the syllabus. What are the requirements? That if you wanted to be an apprentice to a rabbi, because it wasn't as formal as university training, you'd go to the rabbi and say, I'd like to be your apprentice. And he may ask you some questions and then decide whether he's going to take you on. And so that rabbis would talk about what their expectations were as a yoke, using the metaphor. This is what I'll ask you to carry. If you take me on as a rabbi, here's my yoke. If Jesus is using it that way as well, then he's saying, you may find other rabbis far more demanding than I am. Right? Because the other thing, like Bob was referencing last week, is how much faith does Jesus require from those who want to be his apprentice? Mustard seed will do, right? Like, he's not saying, I only take those who have great faith. No, he says, even if it's just the tiniest bit, that'll be sufficient. If that's what he requires as a master, if he doesn't say, I expect you to, live a righteous life. If he says, I know that you can't live a righteous life, and none of us really can, but what I expect you to do is stay close to me, and I'll forgive 70 times 7 all the times you screw up. I think I'll take that course. That syllabus looks pretty good. Right? The requirements are not harsh. I think that's another way, and perhaps culturally, how he was heard. He was speaking as a rabbi, saying, my yoke, my requirements as a rabbi are not nearly as difficult as some of the others you've heard. You've heard other people say what they expect. I'm not a Pharisee requiring you to be a Pharisee and be that, tithe all your herbs and everything meticulously. Look, I'm not doing that. That's not what I'm about. I'm about love your neighbor best you can. And when you screw up, I'm going to forgive you. And we'll just keep working at this, right?
Those Pharisee requirements are a yoke.
Yeah, they're a hard yoke, right? And as Jesus says about them, and they won't even, with their little finger, lift it. They bind heavy burdens which they themselves are not willing to lift. So they're not in the yoke with you. They're requiring those burdens, and they're not going to lift them. Jesus is saying, that's not what I'm doing, right? I'm in there with you, and it's not a heavy burden.
And think about that, though. That could be a joke, too, because it's yoke. Pharisees are yoke, a joke. Come on now, give me something.
Well, he's got a quote in verse 29. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. And here's the quote, and you will find rest for your souls. Okay? I really like the way John David suggested that, of thinking about this, is that God has this history of teaching us to rest. Right? The idea of Sabbath. Why does Jesus institute that in the, or not Jesus, why does God institute that in the world? The idea of Sabbath.
Those Jewish women would have been working themselves to death.
And,
It would have
and
never
everyone did, right? Nobody had a day dedicated to rest. What a radical idea. Now, ironically, Jesus is complaining that by his day, the day of rest has become another burden, right? It's become another burden. What was designed to be a whole day, every week, every 7 days, rest, folks. Why? Because God rests. Because I'm a God of rest. And as the Hebrew writer says, there remains a rest for the people of God. That's describing heaven as rest, right? They have rested from their labors. This idea that God grants rest, I mean, what a radical idea in the ancient Near East. That a whole culture decided every 7 days we're going to rest, and every 7 years we're going to have a year of rest. And then every 7 sevens we're going to have another year we're going to call Jubilee, and we're going to forgive all debts. Now that's a restful culture. That's a culture all about rest. And part of the things that the prophets complain about, I guess it's Amos, maybe is one who complains about people can't wait till Sabbath is over so they can get back to buying and selling. And the problem is when you buy and sell, you do it with dishonest scales. Like you want to get back to your corrupt business practices. You just want to get through the day of rest so you can get back to work. You're missing the whole point. God wants you to rest. It's a gift. And so, and by Jesus' day, religiously, the day of rest has become another burden. And so if somebody's hungry, well, if someone's sick, wait till tomorrow to get tended. If someone's hungry, sorry, I guess you'll just have to be hungry. This is a day of rest. There's no rest in being hungry, right? There's no rest in being sick. So I like that direction, thinking about God being a God of rest. That's what he's trying to get us to do. And in a lot of ways we could say, well, isn't that what faith is? Faith is resting in God. Like we were saying earlier, it's when I realize I don't have to be God, I don't have to work it all out myself. I can just rest. I can take the load off and just say, I'll let God be God, I'll let God care for me, and I can rest in that. And it's an easier place to be. So I like that suggestion as well. Any others? Well, the other thing because of what Bob's brought up last week, I thought deserved so much attention. The other thing I thought about that Bob alluded to was what I wrote about on Thursday. Not that I expect anyone to read what I write on Thursday. It doesn't matter. I don't take it personally. But if you did, it was also trying to talk about this. Because there's a statement in John that men love darkness rather than light. Okay, so what I asked in that, what I wrote on Thursday is Jesus saying, or what is he saying? He says, this is the judgment, that men have loved darkness rather than light, because their deeds are evil. Okay, if we look at it carefully, he doesn't say we love evil deeds. He says we love darkness, which conceals our evil deeds. What I would suggest is, which I did, is we don't, because Bob also raised the point, like we're created in the image of God. So how do you, and that's what I was bringing, how do you square that? If I'm created in the image of God and yet Jesus says, I love darkness, doesn't that kind of stand at odds with the whole, we're created in the image of God? Created in the image of God suggests something good about us, durable, indestructible. We have this, indestructible image of God. Well, then why do we love darkness? So what I suggested was, because Jesus says we love darkness, he doesn't say we love evil. All of us think that what we do is good. Every single last person, even the person you might think about and you go, I can't imagine that person thinks they're doing good. But I think it is absolutely psychologically true. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, I think I'll do what I find personally evil today. Like, go against their own set of values. They don't. Now, we humans, because we're fragile, weak, and easily deceived, can have a wrong set of values. But everybody thinks they're doing good. Even if many others say, that's not good, I'm still convinced it is good. And if that is true, then nobody's like loving evil, what they themselves define as evil, right? Wesley has said it this way: no one gets up in the morning and says, I think I'll destroy the world today. I mean, nobody does that. But, the shorthand way of saying, that's not what we're trying to do. Now, maybe I will kind of destroy my world, but I didn't set off planning to do that. I may have thought, if I do this, it'll work out well, and I was dead wrong, and it blew my world up. But I didn't get up with the idea that I'm going to make my world miserable, right? So here's what I think Jesus is saying. And he says, well, this is the judgment. In other words, this is the truth about the matter. We love the darkness. In other words, we love hiding the fact that what we do may not be right. So here I am thinking I'm right, and someone says, Greg, I don't know that you were right in that. How do I react? I'm going to be like, no, you're wrong. I don't even want to hear the suggestion that maybe I was wrong. I will defend, I will justify, I will make excuses, I will resist the light that says, Greg, maybe you messed up there. Because I don't want to hear it. I would rather stick to the narrative that I'm a good person and what I do is right, even if it's out of step with what others think. They're all wrong, I'm right. I love the darkness. I love, not because I know it's darkness, I love the narrative of telling myself I'm a good, decent human being. And Jesus is saying, but I'll tell you the truth is, we all love that self-justifying narrative. And the reality is, our deeds are evil. For all of us do some things that are evil. We do. Do any of us knowingly do that? Well, sometimes we're aware that we're doing it. But none of us set out to do that, really. Maybe in times of weakness we find ourselves doing that, but then we always feel guilty about it, and we're like, I wish I wasn't doing that. See, so I think what Jesus is getting at is, he's saying, I'm the light that's come into the world. Why are people resisting me? Because I'm uncovering the fact that they're not as good as they imagine themselves to be, and nobody likes to hear that. They would rather stay in the darkness than find out. So maybe that addresses part of the idea of how we can be created in the image of God, and yet Jesus also say, you humans, we humans, not you, but we humans men love darkness rather than light. They're both true. We are created in the image of God. And when we, and our desire to do what we believe is part of that image. That's why I do not knowingly get up and try and do things that violate my own conscience. Right? I try and do what I think is the right thing to do. And I think we all try and do that. But that's because I'm created in the image of God. I have this desire for the right and the good and the true, even if I'm perhaps mistaken about it. Anyway, that's another little bit of the myth.
I also think, though, that the darkness hides those problems that we had. We've talked about
Sure.
before where everybody has their secrets. It's in the darkness.
Right.
And I'm not the only one, but I've said it quite a bit where, I hated that I was going to be at the pearly gates and the judgment day, and they're playing the video, and he said, well, God doesn't want to embarrass you. He's not going to play the video of all those things that are in the darkness. And so you love the darkness or those secrets because you don't want them to be exposed.
Yeah. So I would say the phrase "ignorance is bliss." It really is bliss. It's blissful to be ignorant of your own mistakes because you can think of yourself as a better person, right? But there's a danger to that ignorance, right? So yeah, I love my blindness when my blindness keeps telling me, Greg, you're a good, decent human being, and in fact, you're better than most people, right? That's what my blindness. Actually, I'm actually better than most people I see. That's what my darkness, my blindness, keep telling me. I love that narrative, right? And so I don't want to let go, and I don't want Jesus suggesting, nah, that's not the case, right? So yeah, call it blindness, call it darkness, call it self-deception. It's hard to come to the realization, you know what, I've been wrong a lot. But when that gets forced upon us sometimes, that can be a moment of clarity, is what AA calls it. A moment of clarity. It's in the parable of the prodigal son, and he came to his senses. A moment of clarity. Now, it's an awful moment, because when he came to his senses, he realized, I've been an idiot. I really treated my father poorly. I've wasted my inheritance. You know, that's not an easy place to be, right? But that's that kind of, the darkness finally that he loved finally is gone, and he sees himself. Now, the really good news is when we have that realization, we have a God who loves us and communicates that love to us despite what we've just realized about ourselves.
What if the inheritance was infinite?
Yeah.
What if he didn't run out of money? What if he was able to enjoy his life as the systems that we all have lived under since forever have been towards improving life? Now, one can think about the methods and the modes for that, but it's generally self-aggrandizement. People make products because, you know, they want to kind of make things that are going to make their lives better as well. So we do this every day, day after day. We work hard in school, we get a job, we want to earn more money, we want to separate ourselves exclusively from God, we want to become the rich man. If the rich man were the ideal, and if the rich man was something that was not ultimately going to be taken from us, the question is how many of us would be left for there to be followers. And the thing that I think about is as we see the trajectory of human beings and we see the trajectory of technology, the trajectory of economic systems, as we see a lot of these things, for the most part, I would say certainly improving. Medicine, technology, people's thoughtfulness about these things have been to a greater extent, I would say, at least personally, to be an improvement. You know, if you don't want to die of whooping cough, you don't necessarily have to. But, you know, things like this have gotten better. So all of those things gradually and ultimately will separate us from lying in the gutter. They will separate us from a variety of things. And I see the strivings of human beings as being evil because they ultimately will take us in the distant future at some point permanently away from God. And that's where I think the evolution of this ends.
Yeah, no, I think you're saying, well, not that anyone knows that they're doing things to their own destruction in some sense, but that could very well be what's happening. Why, if it were infinite, yes, why would I ever come to my senses? That's a good hypothetical, but it's not infinite. Right? So the way Richard Rohr says it, he says, people change either because of great love or great suffering. One or the other. Both of those, though they're kind of opposite, they bring you to something bigger than yourself. A great love will get you outside of yourself in that pursuing of ambition. Or great suffering will get you outside of yourself and the foolishness of these pursuits, which can be taken away from you in a minute. So, but you're right. If it were infinite, I don't know that any of us would ever come to our senses. We would keep chasing that elusive thing. Okay, you get the last thought there, Jim. Unless you're going to open a can of worms, in which case you're giving my topic for next week.
I don't think so. I tend to think that Bob's question really kind of answers maybe where we started, in some respects of, the difference between my yoke is easy versus it's hard, and the question of I'm created in God's image and yet I love darkness. It seems to me that the message really may depend on the audience, and not just in the person, but where is that person at the time?
Right.
Because if I'm sitting in a situation where I've got infinite inheritance, I believe that's what I've got. The message is not my yoke is easy, come and take it. It's you're loving darkness, right? I mean, that's going to be the message that I need to hear if I'm in that situation. If my inheritance is run out and I'm eating with the pigs and I'm going back to my father, the message then is you're in my image, son. You were born in my image, and my yoke is easy to come back.
Yeah.
And the same person can find themselves in different situations, and different people in different situations. God's message is for all of us.
Yep. Well said. Good place to stop for today. Thank you, Jim. All right. Well, we're dismissed.